Good evening, good afternoon, and good morning. Welcome to the Daring Cities 2023 Virtual Forum and today's session on funding nature-based solutions in cities, land-based financing to get the job done. My name is Enrique Silva, and I am the Chief Program Officer at the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy in Cambridge, Massachusetts, in the United States. I will be the moderator for today's session. This is a session that sits at the intersection of nature, planning, design, and finance for climate change and resilience. Today, we will explore the promises of nature-based solutions and land-based financing for resilient cities. That is, we will look at ways to work with nature and how to finance those interventions. We have a great program for you today. We will start off with a keynote speech by Sebastian Herold, Senior Policy Officer at the German Federal Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development, better known as BMZ. We then go into a panel with three experts on nature-based solutions and land-based financing. First, we'll hear from Sharon Hill, Head of Cities Unit at the UN Environment Program. Then we go to Daniel Cossack, from the University of Buenos Aires and the National Council of Sciences and Technologies in Argentina. And then we'll end the panel session with Andres Fuentes of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD. We will then wrap up the session with reflections and ideas for a way forward by Eloise Chiku of the Regions for Climate Action and its Resilience Program Manager. So sit tight, we have a great program again for you, and we will go now to Sebastian and the keynote speech. Sebastian, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Enrique, and hi everybody from my side, from close to Berlin in Germany. It's a great pleasure to be here today, and the core question of the session for sure is how can we close the financial gap for nature-based solution? But before we start to talk about this, let me just remind us on the bigger picture, and I'm sure that most of you know the figures, but it's still good to remind us all. We are aware of the rapid urbanization in emerging and developing countries that is one of the greatest transformative forces in our time. And we know that till 2050, the urban population in sub-Saharan Africa alone will almost triple. We know that globally we need to create adequate infrastructure and housing for an additional 2.3 billion people, and we need to achieve this in only 30 years. That's why, and now I'm coming to the ministry I'm working for, the German Federal Ministry of Development Cooperation, known as BMZ, as Enrique said already, is highly committed in supporting cities to become more sustainable and livable, climate neutral, resilient, and nature positive. And let me give you some examples of the topic that we focus on today, on urban-related nature-based solutions. One is that we kind of support the restoration of rivers and mangroves, as well as the sponge city approach for flood protection. We support the creation of urban forests and green spaces for heat regulation and biodiversity, the protection of and restoration of wetlands for water security, and the development of community gardens for sustainable food production. And I'm sure that Sharon Hill and other panelists will give us more in-depth examples of good nature-based solutions in urban areas. And we know that nature-based solutions, in a nutshell, has the potential to balance urban infrastructure with ecosystem protection, sustainable use, and restoration, while at the same time, and that's important to our ministry, contributing to a social and just transformation. But to achieve all this, cities must also have the right financial resources, instruments, and knowledge. Every year, there's a shortfall of around $1 trillion worldwide to finance urban infrastructure. And land-based finance, that's the second topic we're going to talk about today, has the potential to be part of the solution here. BMZ commissioned a study lately, published in the beginning of this year. It reflects on the different ways in which land-based finance can be used, with good examples from partner countries such as Brazil, Ghana, India, or Indonesia. We see the approach offers a huge opportunity to harvest the potential of land as a financial resource for municipalities. It can contribute to a better financial performance of the subnational authorities. It also can improve governance performance in terms of transparency, equity, and inclusion. Reviewing the study, we find that cities in the global south are often pioneers in the implementation of innovative instruments. Looking forward to learn more about land-based finance also from Andres from OECD, of today's panelists. So with this short kind of introduction, I wish you all an inspiring event and many new insights. Thanks for joining.
Thank you so much, Sebastian. Thank you very much for the succinct but really great framing of the topic and the reasons why we should pay attention to this. So we have a wonderful growing audience online, and what we also recognize is that it's probably a very diverse audience that is interested in this, because you're probably coming from an interest or work in nature-based solutions, or perhaps also from working on issues around land-based financing. But we really want to kind of test you out and see who's here. And so we want to do a little quick exercise, a word cloud exercise, if you will. Please join us through this URL to then and help us answer the question: land-based financing and nature-based solutions. What comes to your mind? What comes to mind when you hear those two terms? This will hopefully give us a sense of where you are at with the topic, and hopefully hear some of the issues that we will cover in the over the next couple of minutes in the panel. So please, your thoughts on land-based financing and nature-based solutions. What comes to your mind? There we go. This is where the cloud's getting bigger. We've got some more entries, but not surprisingly, resilience is in the middle. Wonderful. I think, well, I'm very glad that we did this exercise, because clearly we're all in the right place, and all within more than within the vicinity of these topics. Yes, we'll be talking about, and we're all concerned about resiliency, biodiversity, and then again, this big topic of, if we are interested in and concerned about the resilience and promoting biodiversity, the big question is, how do we pay for it? And that's where land-based financing will come in, as Andres will explain. And that's what we want to explore, is not only what are these interventions that we could embrace and advocate for, but if we do that, how will we finance it, and what's the relationship between the types of interventions that we'll be talking about and the ways that we could finance that through land and tools that come out of the suite of land value capture. So yes, we'll be talking about sustainability. There is, I see the word conflict. We might be able to touch on why we might see some conflict at the intersection of nature-based solutions and land-based financing. Vacant buildings, very interesting. I think we might be able to understand why we would be thinking about vacant buildings. Urban planning will be central, I think. So great. I think we've done it. Thank you so much for participating in this work. I will keep it up, and we'll come back to it so that we can see how all of these and many of these thoughts and ideas are connected. So without further ado, I want to pass it to Sharon, who will start us off with a framing of what nature-based solution is and what are the promises in this approach. Sharon?
Thank you, Enrique, and thank you very much for that word cloud, because indeed it tells me a little bit more about the audience. And if you are watching this webinar, it's very likely that you already know or have at least an idea of what nature-based solutions are and how it can help cities to become more resilient, healthy, and equitable. So for many years, cities have been framed as takers, as consumers from nature. But the UN Decade on Ecosystems Restoration now recognizes the potential of urban ecosystems to give back, to become nature positive. Now, for me, I've been working in urban planning for a really long time. That's mind-blowing. That's a mind-blowing idea for cities to actually contribute to biodiversity, to become movers of nature. And it's exciting, and we need it. But how do we do it? So that's really the question that we are struggling with, those that are working in this space. How do cities become truly nature positive? Well, the answer, like for many other things, is money. Investments need to be substantially scaled up in and around cities. And there are already some great examples out there. For example, the Quito Water Fund was established in the year 2000 as an 80-year trust fund that receives revenues from water users, public utilities, private companies to fund nature-based solutions. In 2007, a municipal ordinance stated that 2% of the water utility company revenues had to go to that fund. So it's a successful model that's been replicated throughout Latin America and has generated interest throughout the world. We also have an example from the City of London, who has used natural capital accounting to determine the gross asset value of its public space. So that's a very good argument, right? To protect the what they have estimated now, as 91 billion investment. So this enabled city managers to argue successfully for increased budget allocations to support London green space. So these are success stories, and I want to start with the good news. But in spite of all this innovation that is happening, the bigger picture is a little bit, leaves us a bit wanting. So UNEP's State of Finance for Nature report, for example, finds that current financial flows to nature-based solutions are estimated at 154 billion per year globally. Sounds like a lot, but that is less than half of what is estimated as needed to tackle the triple planetary crisis. Current finance flows to nature-based solutions must double by 2025 and triple by 2030 to halt biodiversity loss, limit climate change below 1.5, achieve land degradation neutrality, resilience to climate impacts such as heat waves and flooding. So to get to the bare minimum, we have to already double these investments. Now, if we look at the economic powerhouses, cities, investments in nature, these are very raw estimates at the urban level, are critical, which are critical components to our efforts, of course. In 2020, NBS received 0.3% of overall spending on urban infrastructure. And even that small percentage is an optimistic one because, quite frankly, when we conducted this research, the problem that we met was lack of data. And so this is an optimistic picture because it came from cities that were reporting and were actually aware of the gap that existed. So they were trying to measure that gap so that they could overcome it. Now, it doesn't take into consideration all of the other cities in the world that we are trying to also incorporate. What we found in our research as well, what we did was from the State of Finance for Nature report, we brought it down to the local level. In our research, we found that national governments have become more willing to funnel sovereign funds and international loans to local governments for nature-based solutions, and there's a growing awareness. But the scale of nature-based solutions investments in cities is not nearly sufficient. So what we are doing in close cooperation with ICLEI, the University of Pennsylvania, GIZ, and BMZ is to find out how to make funds more available to cities and to implement nature-based solutions and think about how the current financial infrastructure can help channel more funds to cities to act on nature. Part of our effort to better understand nature-based solutions financing in cities is a call for proposals that we issued earlier this year. And what we thought would be a small engagement, just an opportunity for cities to better understand how we can monitor progress towards nature positivity over time. It was a tsunami of requests. So in less than 6 weeks, we received more than 250 proposals from cities all over the world requesting funding and expert support to implement nature-based solutions. And when we looked at the proposals, most of them were very, very good. And it showed that the cities have already strategies in place, they are keen. And the cities that have not started implementing NBS yet are interested in testing them to understand what is feasible and to build a case for nature. So we're highlighting this exercise because we want to, and by we, I mean UNEP and the partners under the UN Decade, we want to show that there's an appetite for change. There is an interest in financing nature-based solutions. Most cities understand the value of nature-based solutions to tackle diverse urban challenges, from fire risk, water management, even social cohesion, even to bring back traditional environments to adapt to climate change impacts, et cetera. What is missing is the support infrastructure for capacity building, financial tools, and public advocacy to implement these investment-ready projects. There needs to be some reforms that need to be made, and it's very specific to all of the regions and countries around the world. And budgets need to better incorporate and reflect nature-based solutions in city planning and management. So it's a mixed bag. So there's a lot of interest, a lot of enthusiasm. People are keen to start nature-based solutions, but the bigger infrastructure to support this bottom-up action from the cities needs to happen as well. So let me end here and just say that cities are keen and there's a generation restoration waiting to happen.
Thank you so much, Sharon. Again, thank you for framing the scope of the issue, and always it's always good to start off with the promising trends, and then with challenges. And so I have a couple of questions that I'd love to follow up with, but we do want to get some interaction from the participants, the audience. We have time for one question from the audience? If you have a question, please flag it by raising your hand. Okay, well, then I'll take the privilege of being the moderator and ask you, Sharon, if you can expand a bit more on your thoughts on what it would take to get more adherents to face the challenge and tackle this challenge that you were talking about. There's the challenge of embracing the idea of implementing nature-based solutions, but then you say once you have that challenge, once you embrace that, there's the planning challenge and then the financing, and then of course all of that underlying is the question of, do our cities and do our the people that are intervening and helping the city grow, do they have the capacity to do that? Can you say a bit more about what you see as what would it take to get more of this, more interest, more capacity involved?
Everything. But let me start with a few specifics.
What would be the top everything?
Yeah. Let me get into a little bit more specific. So I think that this is classic, but broadly, a discussion between national and local governments is really important, because for the moment, most of the funding flows to the national governments. For example, loans from multilateral development banks, even though they are targeted to local governments, they flow through national governments. And And this is true for many of the financial instruments that we see for the moment. There is a commission headed by that's led by the mayor of Rio, mayor of Paris, and the SDSN, for example, looking into downscaling improving access of local governments to direct financing, especially for SDG implementation, and which includes nature-based solutions. So there are efforts towards better understanding that, but there's no quick solution, and especially since for nature-based solutions anyway, it can be very site-specific. So if your protected area or shared space is between a region and a local government, and they are not political allies, how do they work together? We need mechanisms to overcome these political barriers, such as that, so that it becomes business as usual, like paying your taxes. Or you don't have a choice, even if you don't want to do it. So how do we make it so that it becomes part of business as usual?
Thank you so much, and thank you for letting me put you on the spot like that. But you're raising a really interesting dynamic. So if a lot of the funding and is coming from, or the resources are coming from central governments down, or it's dependent on a central government, local government relationship, which could be it could be harmonious, but oftentimes it's not. If that's the case, and we still need the funds, this is where I think, and we'll hear from Andres, where land-based financing, which is often also seen as what's called an own source revenue, might break the dependence on on a full-fledged central government set of transfers. But we'll get to that. But before we get to that, we'll go now to Daniel Cossack, who will show us a bit more how some of these nature-based solutions are being come about and are rolled out in some cities. I know he has great examples and ideas, and then he will. He's also a great colleague in that he understands the relevance of approaching a design project with the need to think about how it's going to be ultimately financed so that it goes from idea to reality. So thank you so much, Sharon, for opening up the panel. And now we go to Daniel.
Thank you very much, Enrique. And thanks very much for the invitation. Perhaps the opening question would be, how do nature-based solution projects in cities come to existence? And I would say that they come to existence as a very rational answer to the very current urban problem of having to solve several difficult problems at once. If I had to choose one salient characteristic of NBS projects, I would focus on the fact that they are inherently multidimensional, as opposed to conventional grey infrastructure that in general tends to be one-dimensional. A typical urban NBS project, like a rain garden within a sustainable urban drainage system plan, not only captures runoff water as conventional stormwater drains do, but also absorbs and retains some of or all of the water capture, reducing the peak flow, as well as improving the water quality, working primarily as a biological filter. And at the same time, it improves air quality, captures CO2, as well as all the direct and indirect benefits that urban vegetation usually brings, contributing to create more agreeable public spaces, and so on and so forth. Just an example, the landscape architect who is in charge of the Grey to Green program in Sheffield in the UK, which is a very successful ongoing NBS program that replaces asphalt and in general space taken by individual private cars with rain gardens and space for pedestrian and cyclists covered or flanked by vegetation in general, once told me that the most significant change that he has seen over the last 20 years or so in his field is that whereas before the city hall would typically request from the landscape architecture office, for example, a project for a playground with perhaps the specificity of the type of vegetation and urban furniture required, now the same commission would come with a request of flood reduction, creating perhaps an open air reservoir, air quality improvement, selecting species with an enhanced phyto remediation capacity, carbon sequestration as part of the climate change mitigation effort of the city, the provision of shade to decrease the temperature, contributing to climate change adaptation, etc. That is a nature-based solution project that, among many other benefits, would provide a playground. So probably the one essential condition for an urban NBS project to come to existence is that it has to be planned, designed, implemented, and monitored by a close-knit interdisciplinary team, including urbanists or planners, landscape architects, biologists, ecologists, hydrological engineers, economists, and lawyers, among many other fields. And where we can see examples for successful financing of NBS solutions in city. Well, first of all, as it has been remarked by Sebastian, I think it is important to acknowledge that at the moment there is an important urban NBS finance gap. In relative terms, there are not that many urban NBS projects funded, and this has been widely acknowledged, and it is where we are at the moment. Also, that the vast majority of NBS projects implemented are public funded either by national, provincial, or local government, as is in general the case in the global north, or by multilateral institutions, as is in general the case in the global south. That said, it is also very widely acknowledged that NBS projects create value, and particularly, and to focus on the subject of this panel, NBS projects have the ability to create land value. So where can we see examples of NBS creating land value? Pretty much everywhere where we can see nature mechanisms solving urban problems, like floods, that have an effect on land value. The same goes for the effect that vegetation has on land value, like tree-lined boulevards or a park, because of their capacity to create beautiful places where people want to live nearby. So I will just very quickly share some slides to illustrate and to finish the point. I will illustrate it with a project in which I've been involved for the last 6 years that started with a project at the University of Buenos Aires funded by the Lincoln Institute, which aimed to test the extent to which an NBS project primarily aimed to increase flood protection could be financed by land value capture instruments. At the moment, a pilot project is being built in Buenos Aires, partially funded by Connexus, a European Union Horizon 2020 project, and the expectation is that afterwards it could be scaled up by the local government. Without stopping much at any point, because I know we have very little time and to cover a lot of themes, I will go over these slides very quickly just as a sneak peek. And of course, I'm open for comments and questions at the end or through email afterwards. So these are, this is where we stopped with the Lincoln funded project, and this is where we are at the moment. Building a pilot project, a rain garden in the municipality of San Martin in Buenos Aires. And the idea that this could be a series of rain gardens in the whole hydrological basin of the Medrano Stream River. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Daniel. As we did before, we can open up for questions specific to Daniel's presentation. Please raise your hand if you're interested in, if you have a question for him, or maybe expand a little bit on the case. There is a question in the chat box. 1 second. As always, test my ability. Oh, in the Q&A. If our colleagues can help me read that one,
I'll read it out loud if that's okay. So how can the land value be effectively realized as a nature-based solution is the question in the chat.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, could you repeat it again? I couldn't hear the first part of the question.
Yeah, of course. How can the land value be effectively realized as a nature-based solution?
as NBS, this is a very general question, right? But as NBS projects, like for example, the one that I showed, has the ability to increase land value, then through land value capture instruments, you can recover part of that land value created and either invest it in another NBS project or the same NBS project that produced this value in another phase of the project. But I would say that NBS project can be financed by land value mechanisms in the same way as any other project, urban infrastructure in the city can be financed by land value mechanism. Just probably the particularity is that it seems like nature-based solutions have the ability to create more value many times that conventional urban infrastructure does. So then you have the potentiality to increase the land value and have more capacity to capture that. But yeah, so.
Thank you. Yeah, you passed the land value capture test, and it's a good bridge to what Andres is going to do, which he'll go through more systematically through what we mean by land-based financing, how it operates, and the range of tools, because there are many tools that could be used to recover the value. But before we go that, I'm seeing a theme emerge from Sharon's presentation and yours, Daniel, and I speak also as a planner. Fundamentally here, someone needs to come up with the idea to plan a nature-based solution. And then not only that, but you're adding that if you do come up with these ideas or these designs, you're advocating and you say that what's needed is this multidisciplinary team from the beginning through the life of this project. Could you say more, at least from your experience, how those, how authorities, local authorities, in the case of San Martin, have embraced or come up with the ideas and taken it so that they don't immediately think of doing another concrete gray infrastructure, wastewater or floodwater system. Just a little bit more about that first point, that point of departure. We have an idea. This is what we want to do, and we'll go look for funds and people.
Yeah, this is a very good question because NBS projects are inherently multidimensional. So they require these structures that not only allow them to be implemented, but that facilitate later on the monitoring, as you said, Enrique. So I think that a bit like in the same way as basin authorities or basin committees allow different jurisdictions to work in the same hydrological problem, it is very widely acknowledged that if you have a hydrological problem, you don't have to work through the administrative jurisdiction, sometimes the national frontiers. You have to work with the actual geomorphological limits of your hydrological basin that in most cases goes through different jurisdictions, local governments in most cases, sometimes provinces, and many times countries as well. So this problem that creates hydrological basins also offers the opportunity to create these structures. And the same goes for NBS projects that not only have to deal with these natural spatial units like ecosystems or landscape units or hydrological basins, but also they need the structure that goes beyond the typical field structure, disciplinary structure that organize local governments like the hydrological department. So you need these very interdisciplinary structures and also this very fluid articulation between jurisdiction. That's a starting point.
Thank you so much. Sounds complicated, but the good thing is that we're all presenting, there are cases of this, we're doing it, which is very promising. So thank you so much, Daniel. And now we go on to Andres, who will give us the nitty-gritty on land-based financing examples so that we could tie all of these concepts, ideas, and challenges together. And then we'll move on to a good set of minutes for open discussion with everyone. Andres, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Enrique. I will do my best as much as I can do in a few minutes in a policy field that is still evolving. First of all, many thanks for this opportunity to present our work on land-based finance and what it can do to make nature-based solutions happen. Work that we undertake here in the OECD Center for Entrepreneurship, SMEs, Regions and Cities. And I think the potential is large. Yeah. Land value capture, land-based finance, or synonymously, as I prefer to call it, land value capture, is based on a simple premise. Public action should generate public benefits. And the public action we have in mind here are actions to improve infrastructure and the use of land, including through nature-based solutions. Such actions raise the values of land and buildings. And nature-based solutions do so too. As Daniel Kozak has explained, nature-based solutions have a broad range of well-being benefits, which is a good thing. And these well-being benefits are capitalized in land prices. Where they accrue to wealthy landowners, they can provide the resources to make nature-based solutions happen. Land value capture, so if we can stay on this slide still for a little while. Land value capture is of interest for cities from a public finance point of view, not only for its revenue potential. It can also be an economically efficient and equity-enhancing revenue source. Land value gains to private landowners, which result from public infrastructure, are windfall profits for them. Tapping such windfall profits does not discourage investment and may not have knock-on effects on rising housing costs, for example. Besides, windfall profits on real estate accrue more to wealthy households. And so this is the equity case. And thirdly, the revenues from land value capture are often front-loaded, just like the expenditure on investment projects, including for NBS. And therefore they can help reduce cities' borrowing needs. And finally, land value capture is a local funding instrument that is well suited for the local investment we need to deal with climate change. And so here we can move to the next slide. Land value capture is underused across the world. This is what we have found in the global compendium of land value capture policies that we have developed here at OECD with the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy. And this compendium is a tool for countries to learn from each other so they can better apply land value capture tools to urban development. Let's see on the next slide how a range of different land value capture policy instruments can work in practice. For example, the infrastructure levy is a tax or fee which is levied on real estate owners benefiting from a new nearby public infrastructure. For example, it could be levied on real estate owners benefiting from upstream flood protection that NBS can provide. In Cali, Colombia, the Cañaveralejo River project, for example, seeks to enhance urban resilience against flood hazards by bolstering natural river flows. And infrastructure charges, infrastructure levies were seen as a possible instrument to finance this project. In developer obligations and charges for development rights, developers or owners are often asked for in-kind contributions rather than monetary contributions. In developer obligations, developers make a contribution in exchange for the permission they get to build on undeveloped land. For example, they may be asked to provide parks or green areas. In charges for development rights, real estate owners can be asked for a contribution in exchange for the right to expand existing buildings, for example, by adding to building height. In the Indian city of Calcutta, for example, there is a proposal to use land value capture instruments to create rainwater catchments. The proposal foresees these measures to be undertaken with charges for development rights, whereby real estate owners give up parcels of land in exchange for the permission to raise the height of the buildings. So summing up, land value capture can help address two key specific challenges that often still hold back nature-based solutions. Investment in nature-based solutions does in itself not generate revenues. And it may also prevent some land to be used for economic purposes, which would then generate such revenues. And so land value capture can provide these missing revenues. And secondly, nature-based solutions need public space, which is contested in cities. And land value capture can help make it available. But beyond the question of resources, land value capture can also provide a policy framework that brings the actors together to make nature-based solutions happen to the benefit of all the actors, bringing together landowners, developers, and city governments. This closes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andres, and thank you for doing what I know from personal experience, the difficult task of unpacking and defining and making this concept of land value capture accessible to all. Let's go. So we have a couple of minutes for if you have questions, clarification questions, or any range of questions for Andres on this last session of the panel on the specifics of land value capture. I found out where the Q&A thing is, and there's several questions now. All right. We have a question to Andres. Is it reasonable to charge a levy for the value accrued from infrastructure when that value has not been realistically effective?
Yes, well, I guess this question is about what city governments need to do to be able to use land value capture. And indeed, they need to be able to assess land values and the gains in land values that result from nature-based solutions. And from what I've seen, there are perhaps two directions in which one can go. When we've worked with Indonesia to help Indonesia use land value capture to finance flood protection, investment, an investment in water provision, we suggested that they rely on the services of professional surveyors. But we've also seen the use of sophisticated statistical tools that attribute changes in land values to different amenities that are nearby. And these statistical tools can also serve to help local governments assess land value gains that can then be put to use for nature-based solutions.
Thank you for that. And I'm going to swing back to Daniel, because Daniela, if you don't mind building off of what Andres was saying, in your research and the work that you did for the Lincoln Institute, which is one of the reasons we were so happy to work with you, is that you proposed a way to model this very challenging point. Is like, how do we measure that increment? Because if we don't identify the increment, which is a manifestation of the impact, the positive impact, at least economically, on a property, then we don't have a foundation to say we're recovering it through land-based financing. Could you speak a bit about the methods or the approach that you took in your work to make the argument that there are increments involved, and significant ones potentially, in a project like the one in the municipality of San Martin?
Yes, sure. Thanks for the question. Well, our main argument was that there was an increase in land value because of two reasons: because of flood production. So, and there is a very vast bibliography that relates increased flood protection with an increase of land value. So in that case, our NBS project would work exactly in the same way as an alleviation tunnel. So you would have to, through a hydrological model, to explain, for example, in this particular plot, without this intervention, for this particular storm, you would have 10 centimeters of water during the storm. With this intervention, you would have 2 centimeters. So, and this relates to, this has an effect on land value, and this has been very proved and done over the years, way before NBS. But then we had a second argument, which was that not only an NBS project would increase the land value because of the flood, the flood protection increase, but also because it would enhance the quality of the space. It's the same as increasing the land value because it doesn't flood that much, and also because a boulevard or a park is built in front of you. So you have another literature that relates to increases because of vegetation. So we consider many different methodologies, hedonic models, and different ways of measuring increases in land value. But we ended up using a parametric methodology, selecting the most similar cases in which it was proven through very robust methodologies that the increase in land value would exist. And then we applied coefficients with a margin. We didn't say exactly, we gave ranges of increases. So, but this is obviously very specific to case, and this is the best solution that we could come up with our studio, but there are many other ways. And I would say that in general, they are not that different from any other increases in land value uplifts with any other urban intervention.
Yes, if I may chime in on that, in fact, it's not necessary that for each project land value gains are assessed, which may be a challenging thing to do. In fact, in our global compendium of land value capture policies, we've seen that many countries, for example, Ecuador, successfully apply land value capture policy tools using approximation formulae, where the proximity of a real estate asset to the new infrastructure guides the contribution that the owner is asked to make.
Thank you both. Thank you. So let's move. We've again, thank you all, and also the audience for putting in such great questions. I'm going to ask you a question. It's with two parts that hopefully will also bring Sharon in with some more examples. So this is really for all three. The question is there not an incentive to implement nature-based solutions in rich communities as land value capture would be higher in absolute terms and thereby neglecting poorer areas? And then adds, how can land value capture be applied in slums for informal settlements or where ownership and taxation is already hard or difficult? How can this actually support those effective? So if I may, to bring Sharon in, Sharon, could you talk about, or do you have any experiences or cases where the solutions have been in places that are not already capital or infrastructure rich, so that the value and of the nature-based solution intervention is actually applied in places that traditional planning and investments have ignored? I was wondering from your experience and in your work, that purposelessness of targeting traditionally underinvested formal or informal parts of cities with nature-based solutions. If you can lead us with that.
Well, the discussion around land value capture actually took me back to the early days of my career working in Hong Kong as an urban planner. And it has a lot of great examples of land value capture, I feel, including in the development of transport infrastructure and making that making their public transport sustainable through land value capture. But the reason I'm saying this is it's not directly linked to nature-based solutions, but the idea that these are public goods, the things that the investment in public goods would apply, would not necessarily just be in wealthier neighborhoods. So if what we get from the investments are reinvested into public goods, parks, etc., then the risk of gentrification is lower, obviously. That said, a more recent example in my career, we were working recently with Mexico City around improving and understanding the value of food gardens around the city as a nature-based solution. That is indeed tricky because then you're looking at private land and transforming and improving the value of this private land through public investments. And how would that translate? I was listening very keenly to Andres' presentation because I myself do not have the answer to that. It's really around regulation, very site-specific, city-specific regulation in order to get that balance. Not a straight answer. Apologies.
Thank you so much. Well, I don't think we ever build this as a venue where we'll have straight answers. We're provocative examples and questions that will keep us engaged, hopefully, but also it's some good illustrations. So I'm wondering if Daniel or Andres, you have some thoughts on that, this very broad
Yes.
but very relevant set of questions.
Yes. Well, clearly the idea must be that where valuable real estate assets and wealthy owners of the real estate assets benefit, that they ask for a contribution, so that this frees resources to provide nature-based solutions also for those who cannot contribute. And that must be the idea. And then the public funds must be managed that way. Either the revenues are not fully earmarked to the project in question, so a part of the revenues that is generated from land value capture is also put, be it into the general government budget or into projects that cannot be financed with land value capture. So that would be one way of doing it. But clearly, the idea must be this one. Else, as the question suggests, there's a risk. Otherwise, land value capture could backfire with respect to the impact on inequality. So it's very important for land value capture policy tools to be used for the right things. Right? That's very important. Land value capture in itself may not be a solution in itself, but it can be used to support the solutions, such as nature-based solutions.
And this is something, and I'll intervene, I'll take off my moderator hat and put on my Lincoln Institute hat, because this is something that we actually have to make sure that it is clear that issues of gentrification in our work, when we've seen it, issues of gentrification and so forth, are not necessarily triggered by the use of land value capture as a financial mechanism. It's the planning intervention that needs to be thought of critically. What is the planning intervention that's desired? And does a planning intervention contemplate ensuring that residents aren't displaced? And if, for those folks that are interested, you should please visit our website to look at a fascinating case in Sao Paulo, Brazil, on how the redevelopment of an area, several areas in Sao Paulo, were funded through land value capture, but also were raising revenues to allow informal settlements and low-income households to stay in place. Before we go to the closing, I wanted to make sure that Eloise, before we go to Eloise, I wanted to quickly, Daniel, if you had any thoughts, and then we'll go to our closing remarks.
No, I completely agree, and I think it's a very good point and a good message to have it clear that it's not that it is suggested that land value capture could be applied and solve all the financial problems of it. It has to be very well targeted, and I completely agree with you and Andres just said.
Great, thank you so much, and thank you all three of you. And we have the last set of minutes, and we have the pleasure of hearing from Eloise, who will give us some inspiration and some ways to think about the path forward. Eloise, please take the floor.
Yes, thank you very much. So Eloise from Regions 4 here. I'm just going to connect everything that we've heard today with what's going to happen soon at COP28, as this is a real opportunity to carry those messages about the importance of nature-based solutions in solving some parts of our ambitions towards climate. As you know, this year is the year of the global stocktake, where national governments will be asked to review the progress on their commitments since the Paris Agreement. And it's also an important year on shaping the future goal on adaptation. And obviously nature-based solutions are very crucial to adaptation. So just as you know, while numerous nations have made significant strides towards their nationally determined contributions and their national adaptation plans, the results of the summary report of the global stocktake that was out 2 weeks ago and the latest IPCC report really shows that we are far behind our mitigation targets. And in those two reports is really emphasized the role of nature-based solutions as really providing opportunities to bolster mitigation and adaptation actions. And so therefore initiatives such as those that we've discussed today, like land value capture, urban landscaping, reforestation, greening of urban spaces, and others are really clear components of the climate action strategies that need to be put in place. And we've seen that cities, but I would also add also regional and other subnational governments are really key in that solution, as they can serve as laboratories of innovative policymaking and also action experimentation because of their closeness with their localities, their citizens. And like we've heard today, this idea of working, co-creating solutions with different actors. So they possess really immense potential to scale up innovative solutions such as those that we've discussed today. Maybe I just wanted to maybe stress what we are doing with others, such as GIZ, but as part of the local governments and municipal authorities constituency, is essentially we are presenting at COP some key messages that gather what we've said today. And I just wanted to stress a few because I think they connect well with our discussion today. Essentially, some of the messages that we're carrying as a declaration from subnationals to the COP, as a first message, is the importance of really recognizing within the national determined contributions and the national adaptation plans, the importance of nature-based solutions, but the importance also of the contributions of cities, local and regional governments. Really with this idea that a review of progress needs to take into account all different types of levels of governments and also what they're doing to activate and accelerate on progress. Another key message that we're carrying at COP, very connected to our conversation today, is obviously this question of finance, making sure that adaptation finance must be more accessible, particularly at the subnational level, and must facilitate investments in locally led nature-based solutions. And as we've seen today, cities, local and regional governments require streamlined access to international climate finance, but also to local finance. And there are some innovative solutions, such as those that we mentioned today, like the land-based financing, that can offer concrete opportunities for implementation, but also for upscaling and learning between different cities and regions. And finally, maybe, and I'll close on that, a key message that we're bringing at COP is in this idea of creating a global goal on adaptation. We really want to push that obviously one of the strong pillars needs to be nature-based solutions as a key component of its implementation. And it's obviously an imperative to acknowledge and support the role of local, regional, and subnational governments in preserving biodiversity, encompassing what we've discussed today, those solutions that we've discussed, but even beyond, making sure that financing really targets locally led and nature-based solutions. So we are asking for the new goal on adaptation, its framework to monitor progress in implementing locally led nature-based solutions and captures these solutions as part of the future framework. So I'll end here, but just to say that obviously we want to work with you to bring these messages to COP, to elevate these messages, to show how local solutions can be upscaled to the global level. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eloise, for bringing us to close with those great thoughts, and then ultimately showing us where we're at the level at which we're talking about these issues and the interest, and also showing us the opportunities that for those of us that are interested in these topics to participate in any capacity. Thank you all. Thank you, Sebastian. Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Andres. And special thanks to our colleagues at ICLEI and Daring Cities for putting together this session in the Daring Cities Session 2023. We would like to invite you to our last two virtual forum events. They're taking place tomorrow at 10 and 12. These events are for the research and innovations towards a just and equitable climate response, which will be focusing on human needs-based transformative innovation. While the second event will look at how research agendas can be a driving force for change. More information can be found in the Zoom chat. So once again, thank you so much for your attention, your interest. We hope we piqued your interest. And if you have additional questions or are curious for more material, please reach out to any one of us that participated here. Thank you so much and have a good day or evening wherever you are.